stands for Torah, which is the first 5 books, and which is the prophets, beginning with the book of Joshua, going through Malachi, and then Ketuvim, which are the writings, which have from the book of Psalms all the way through the end of Chronicles. So the Hebrew Bible is organized by the type of material and then by chronology, which is a little different than the way I know some other Bibles have their order. So you're going to want to get a Tanakh, a Hebrew Bible. It doesn't have to be in Hebrew. You can get lots of good Jewish Bibles that are done either in English, Spanish, Russian, French, every language. Those are not hard to find. Perfect. So getting a Tanakh is job number 1. Because what is the foundation of being Jewish? It's knowing what God has shared with us so that we know how to live. And the Tanakh is book number 1 for the record of what God has shared with us. So you will also see, you can get one for yourself or you can just use, when we're here, something that looks like this. This is called the Eitchaim Chumash. Now a Chumash is a little different than the Torah. The Chumash, that's a really bad thing. Hold on a second. Let's try that again. I'm not an artist. The Chumash has the Torah, all the sections that we read each week in the synagogue, plus it has pieces, just pieces from the prophets, what we call the Haftarah. If you're reading more than one, Haftarah. And my apologies for my bad handwriting. And the Haftarah are the sections from the prophets that we read each week. And the Chumash puts them together very easily. If you're using the Tanakh, you have to jump around a lot to find them. If you're using the Chumash, it's all together. Or you can go to Sefaria and one click, and you've got it. Okay, so a Chumash is a good thing to have. Another thing that you need to have is a Siddur, is a prayer book. We're going to talk a lot more about prayers in later weeks, and why we have a prayer book rather than just praying whatever we think. But trust me, having a prayer book is very, very important in Judaism. However, there are lots of different Siddurim, lots of different prayer books. So you have a couple options. You can get a prayer book that has everything in it. That is to say, prayers for the regular days of the week, prayers for Shabbat, and prayers for festivals, all in one book. For example, Siddur Sim Shalom. This is a all-together prayer book in the conservative movement, and you can get the pocket edition. Now, this doesn't fit in my pocket, but this is the pocket edition. Now, the nice thing about these, and these are the same book, it's just printed differently. The nice thing about these is it's got everything that you're going to want. Prayers for each day, prayers for Shabbat, prayers for holiday, it's all in one book. The problem is, it's hard to find your way because it's got everything in it. And also, it doesn't have a lot of room for extra information. This book, which is the Siddur that we use in our sanctuary on a regular Shabbat, is called Lev Shalem. And this Siddur, and I'll pass this around, has a lot of extra commentary and explanation around each prayer. So it's a helpful boost for understanding why we are praying this way, why we use these words, and what the meaning of the prayer is. But of course, all the extra information takes extra space. So this prayer book only has the prayers for Shabbat. So you have to try and choose which prayer books you need. So let's go ahead and we'll just send a few around so people can look at that. Longer arm. Is that okay? I think I didn't unplug it. It's fine. Okay. So, or you can, like I said, you can download the Siddurim online, and there are English Siddurim you can download as well. and you can print out your own. But it's kind of nice to have a proper book. Other books you're going to want to have are books that tell you a bit more about what we do and why we do it. Two that I recommend are The Observant Life and The Jewish Home Advisor. They both do a similar job, but a little different, right? The Jewish Home Advisor is very nice at telling you exactly what you're supposed to do for different holidays, for different mitzvot. For example, how you put up a mezuzah. It will give you a very good example and show a diagram and tell you the blessings. It's very clear. It's even got some pictures. Oh, there we go. I knew there was a picture somewhere. I missed it. All right, well, we don't all need pictures. It's got very nice explanations of different things, but it's very direct. It doesn't tell you a lot about why we are doing the things. It doesn't tell you much about the history of the things. It doesn't tell you a lot about the spiritual meaning of the things. This book, The Observant Life, does that job. And it talks also more about different commandments and different things that we do that are not always things that are so easy to put into that book. So, for example, this talks about how are you supposed to behave with your family? How are you supposed to behave with your job? How do you behave with being a citizen of the United States? Those are topics that this also covers. It talks about Shabbat, it talks about keeping kosher, it talks about the holidays, but it talks about other things too. So those are two more books that you would want to consider having and checking out. Other books that are good to have, A History of the Jews or Jewish History for Dummies. It's not a bad book. It's actually a really good book. It's a bad title, but it's a really good book. And both of these are a nice, short summary of Jewish history. Because as you're going to see when we go through week by week, there's a lot of things in Jewish life that it helps if you understand the history of our people. If it helps if you understand how the different traditions and customs were developed, it also helps you feel why it's so important that we're Jewish and why we have held on to Judaism for so long, despite many different problems. Other books that are on the list here, Commentator's Bible. This is a very nice example of how you can read the Torah with extra commentary around it. You can also, like I said before, do that with Sefaria, where they have the commentary as well. But it's very important to remember that when we read the Torah, we don't read it only with our own eyes. We have to be part of the conversation, all the different people talking and sharing their ideas so that we understand it better. Right? It's not just me and my book, it's me and 100,000 people and the book trying to learn more than I can learn by myself. So it's important to make sure you get at least a little commentary when you're reading. Back to the sources, which is here, is a nice book if you want to learn more about where do all these books come from and what does each one do. We're going to talk about more of how all the books fit together next week, but this is a very nice book if you want to go into more detail than we can do in the class. As well as this lovely book, The Jewish Holidays Guide and Commentary, which is a great book for getting more information about how we observe and celebrate different holidays, and also how where the meaning of the holidays is, the spirit of those different holidays. So pass those around. Okay, and there are many other books out there. So if you look at the bottom, I have a list of online stores. If you're looking to buy more Jewish books, if you're not sure, because there are a lot of books out there about religion, and even a lot of books out there about Judaism, but if you're not sure whether it's a reliable book, a good book, an accurate book, you can always check with me. But these three different book sites that sell books, they sell books that are all fine. Now, as you're going to learn, there are many, 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 many different opinions in Judaism about some things. So you might find a book that has a different opinion than other books. That's okay. But if you're buying from a regular Jewish bookstore, then at least you know it's inside the Jewish set of ideas. Making sense? Maybe? A little bit? Okay. And then just the very bottom, just a few other things to keep in mind. Hebrew classes are going to start up on August 27th, which is Sunday morning. And we're going to have a beginners group and an intermediate group. And we're also going to have conversational English classes for those that are interested. And that has an excellent teacher, my wife. And then you should already be marking your calendars for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur so that you can come and experience high holidays, Yamim Noraim, together with us. And if you're not a member, you just contact the office and you can get tickets. Okay. That is the intro to some of the resources available. But I want to use the rest of the time to talk about what do we actually believe as our basis of Judaism. What is the root, if you will? Because we're going to talk about a lot of different holidays. We're going to talk about a lot of different commandments, mitzvot. We're going to talk about a lot of different history. But it's important when we talk about all of that to keep remembering the core ideas, the core values, the core principles that is under all of that. And really, there's no better summary than the 13 principles that were written by Rambam. Rambam, also known as Maimonides, or Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, was a great sage from 1,000 years ago, and he was a genius. You know, if you know, like Leonardo da Vinci, right? Well, Rambam was like Leonardo da Vinci. He was an absolute genius. He was a doctor, he was a scientist, he was a judge, and he was a philosopher, and he was a writer, and of course a rabbi. So in all of that, he was able to leave us so many different books and so many different teachings that have been very, very important for 1,000 years. And we'll talk more about him a little bit next week when we talk about some of the important books in Judaism. But one of the things he did when he was writing one of his commentaries was he answered a question which was trying to say, what do Jews actually need to believe? What are the basic beliefs that are kind of required in Judaism, and that if you were to go outside of it, it would be a problem. It would not be in the mainstream of Judaism. And he came up with 13 different points. This is before PowerPoint and bullet points, but he came up with 13 different points that he said, this is what we ought to believe. Now, it's a summary, and there are lots of details, and right after he finished, many, many different people wrote commentary about what each point really means, and so there's more detail. They're not really simple, but the basic idea, hopefully, we can get across. All right, we ready? Okay. Turn the page.
Thank you.
Okay, so the first principle, and this one really is kind of a first principle, to believe in the existence of the Creator and that there is a being complete in all the ways of existence. That is to say, God. That's how we would describe God in casual conversation. But when he is saying to believe in the existence of a Creator and that there is a being complete, what he is saying is that there is a God. God made the whole universe, right? Not just the world, but everything. And God is complete. In fact, he goes on to say, through him does this existence, right? Everything else in existence, survive. And from him is their survival. Meaning we and the table and the sun and space, we need God. But God doesn't need us. Right? We're dependent on God. But God is not dependent on us. And that is one of the most important things to realize that's different between us and God. Right? I need things. I need food. I need air. I need water. I need somebody to give birth to me. Right? I need to be created by somebody else. and that person had to be created by somebody else. But God? No. God was not created by anything else. God did not need anything else. There was nothing else before God. God is, as we're going to see, the beginning, the middle, the end, and outside of time.
What is the reason for creation?
Exactly, right. So God is the whole generation of creation. Right.
For what?
Why did he create everything?
Okay, why, yeah.
We'll get there later.
Okay.
Later. Right. So why did God bother creating the universe is a question that I want to get to after we've got the other basics down. But the idea that there is a God, and that this God is completely different than us, and that this God created the whole universe, that is idea number one. Idea number two, which I didn't put in bold, is that God is one.
Yeah.
The unity of God, which is to say that we believe that he who is the cause of everything, the God that created everything, is one. And it is not like the one of a pair, and not like one of a group, and not like one person that can be divided into smaller units, and not like a simple body, which is numerically one, counting one, but rather God, may he be blessed, is one in a unity that has no unity like it. So this is where it gets a little confusing, right? How many pens do I have? One. But one pen in my hand doesn't mean there aren't other pens. Right? There's only one pen here, but there's other pens somewhere else. Right? They're stored, although those pens aren't so good anymore. But there's one pen, but there are also other pens. When we say there's one God, we mean there can't be any other gods. It's not one God here, one God there, one God there. It is one God, and nothing else could also be God. To be God is to be alone. To be God is to be single. There cannot be anything else. And this is just very much a simple idea. If God is greater than everything, then there can't be a number two. Right? Because you can't have two 100%. That doesn't make sense. Right? There's something that is everything, and then there's everything else that's less. So God is only one. Right? We can't add to God. We can't take away from God. You can't cut God into pieces. Sometimes we may talk about God like God has pieces. Sometimes we'll talk about God's hand. Sometimes we'll talk about God's love, as though that emotion is somehow changing in God. But those are just poetry. God is one and never changing. Right? Because to change, you need pieces. And God doesn't have any pieces. We'll go back over that throughout our whole study, but that's a principle to start with. Part 3, denial of his physicality. That is, we believe that the unity that we mentioned is not a body. So, very important principle, and more details from Rambam here, of course. God has no body. I got a body. You've got bodies. The table has a body. Right? The chair has a body. The book has a body. The air has a body. The sun has a body. Everything in all of existence has some existence, some stuff that it's made up of, except God. And God can't be made up of some stuff, according to our Jewish belief. It's not that God just doesn't. God can't be. Now that may sound a little weird, like, well, God can't do something? But how can God, which is perfect and which is everything, decide to be only in one place and one thing? Right? Even if God was the size of the sun, which is enormous, what about the rest of the universe? God's not there? God's only in the sun? Right? Which is, in the old world, people used to believe that there were suns in the gods, and sun in the moon, or God in the moon, and God in the planets, and God in the tree, and God in the mountain. And Judaism said, no, you can't have a real God in a box, in a thing. Even if it's as big as the sun, that means God is limited to that place. And that doesn't work if God is truly perfect, and God is truly one. The sun can be in one place, that's fine, but not God. So God has no body. Good? Good. Okay. Number 4, pre-existence. And that is, we believe that the unity we mentioned is absolutely pre-existing and no other existing thing beside him was pre-existing in relation to him. Don't you love philosophy? Okay. A little bit simpler. Let's erase this. Creation, right? Creation happened at one point in time. Boom! The world is created. God makes the universe.
Big Bang.
Right? We'll talk about the Big Bang later, but you are here. Right? This is 2017, also known as 5777. Right? That's where we are today. There was something before us. Right? Before you were born, there was a world. Before you were born, there were your parents. Before your parents were your grandparents. There was something that was always before all of us. Everything in the universe. But God? Where do we put God's start on this line?
Before the creation.
Before the creation?
Exactly. Before, after, during. God is not on the line. Right? God is not changing every day the way our planet changes, the way my body changes. God was before everything was made, God is after everything made, and God is not changing in the meantime. It's the same God 1,000 years ago as a God 1,000 years from now. The world is changing. The universe is changing. God is not, and there was nothing before God to make God. Right? So there was no first God who made God and then God made him. No. God is everything outside of the universe, the time, everything that we know. I know. Doesn't exactly fit in our brains so well. Because we're used to things like chairs and books and air and people. God is not like us. But that's why we are going to move into number 5. But before we get to number 5, let me point out that the first four principles that Rambam's talking about, many people around the world believe. And even in the ancient world, the ancient Greeks and the Romans, they kind of believed these too. But there was a difference. They stopped at the first 4. They said, oh yeah, there's something that made the whole universe, and it's special, and it's one, and all of that. But you know what? It's gone. It's not something that I can think about. It's not something I can relate to. It's not something I can talk to. And it's not something that cares about me. And Judaism says, yes, yes you can. Because even though I'm here, I can still connect to God. And God can still connect to me. And because of that, we get principle number 5, and the rest of them as well. So principle number 5, that he is the one that is fitting to serve and exalt and make his greatness known. That means that only God, the God that we're describing, only God is something that we should worship and celebrate and pray to and say is amazing and wonderful. We shouldn't say that the sun is a God. We shouldn't say my idol is a God, because none of those are anything like the real God. And if I have a statue, like they used to make these big statues of Zeus and Athena and all of that, the statue is not a real God. And you're bowing down to a rock? I mean, it's a pretty rock. They carved it very nicely, but it's just a rock. Or wood. Why are you doing that? This is not the real God. The real God doesn't have a body. The real God is only one, and the real God is beyond our ability to 100% understand. So that is what is worthy. That is what we should be celebrating, worshiping, praying to. But it's more than that, because on number 6, because number 5 says that we should celebrate God, that we should worship God, we should talk about how great God is. Number 6 says God cares about us. Right, number 5, we should care about God. Number 6, God has cared about us. Because God has given prophecy. Now, what does prophecy mean? Prophecy does not mean picking lottery numbers. Prophecy is not predicting the future just because it's fun to know what's going to happen tomorrow. What's that? It's okay. It's okay to comment or ask questions. Right? Right. So, prophecy is when a person has prepared him or herself, and there were female prophets and male prophets, to be able to allow their mind to be open to what God is trying to share with the world. And that's hard. Because most of us, we think, oh, we're open, we want God to talk to us, we want God to be part of our life. But most of us are so caught in our own worries, our own dreams, our own ideas, that whatever God is trying to send us and signal us, we don't really either hear it or we change it by the time it comes out of our own mouth. The prophets were able to get the message and to share the message clearer than the rest of us can get. And that was because God wanted the people who live in this world to actually know what God wants. And that is an amazing, amazing gift. So, to come back to your question of why creation, this is part of why. Because God wanted for there to be these special creatures, what we call human beings, that would be made from stuff, but with a soul, with a spirit, that could choose. Right? Because God already had spirits that can't choose. We call them angels. Right? Angels are God's puppets. Angels only do what God wants them to do. Human beings, we often do things God doesn't want us to do. Right? We have a lot of free will, and we often use it in ways that are not so great. But God didn't want us to just go through the world in the dark, trying to figure out the right way to live, to make our spirits grow. God wanted to give us the instruction book, the guidebook, the map, prophecy, Torah, so that we would have a clue about how to live, but still have choice in how to live. Because it's through choice, through our soul, choosing to live in this world, with all of its stuff, in a way that reaches towards God, that makes our soul change, that makes our soul become more beautiful, more amazing, and what we would call closer to God. And that is the purpose of creation. Because without this giant vehicle of a universe, that can't happen. Because without the whole vehicle of stars and galaxies and bodies, we can't transform ourselves by choosing to act in certain ways. Because we would either be just dirt or just an angel. And God chose to make us something better. And we'll talk about that more in other times. All right, so time check. So now we're on number 7. So prophecy is great. There have been a few people who have been able to receive and understand and share the vision that God gives us. But there's one guy, who does it better than everybody else. And we call him Moshe, or in English, Moses. So Moses was unique in all of human history. Nobody before and nobody since. And what was Moses' gift? What is in the Torah, in the Bible, what is the thing they say was really super special about Moses? He was humble. Why was that so special? Because it meant that you knew that everything that God gave him came out without any of Moses being added to it. Right? It's imagine like a translator. And if you have a good translator or a good interpreter, then when they translate or they interpret, the personality of the translator you can't feel. You don't sense who the person is translating. It's just the words are being changed from one language to the other. That was Moses. He took the visions of God and put them into English, into Hebrew, so that we would know what God wanted. And when he did it, he didn't say, oh, but I also want this. He didn't add anything of himself. And he didn't say, oh, I don't like that, and then leave it out. No. Everything that God put in him came out clean as it could be into this world. And that was unique with Moses. Even the other prophets, even Isaiah or Ezekiel or other great prophets, they always added a little bit of their own feeling, their own layer of imagination. And that's why they're much harder to read. If you've ever read Isaiah, Isaiah's a lot harder to read than Leviticus. Leviticus almost seems boring because it's so straightforward. But straightforward is the best. That means we know what to do. And that's why Moses' prophecy, the first 5 books, right? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Bereshit, Shemot, Vayikra, Bamidbar, Devarim, those first 5 books, those are where all of the commandments are. That's where all of the mitzvot are. 613 of them. Because only Moses' vision was perfect and clear enough to be a law for all of us for all time. Even the other prophets, they couldn't make a law for everybody forever because their vision wasn't 100% clean. Not clean like bad clean, but 100% not of their own ideas. So Moses stands as very important, and that's why the Torah is the most important part of the Bible. You okay? Okay. All right. Which brings us to number 8. Moses is a great prophet. Good. But what did Moses give us? The Torah. But is the Torah really 100% accurate? People think, right? That's the question. We have a book. It's 3,000 years old. Is this really what God wants us to know? Or maybe somebody added something somewhere in the Torah, right? Or maybe someone deleted something that they didn't like. They got out the scissors and just cut the piece in. So number 8 is that we believe that the Torah that we have, all of it, is the Torah God wants us to have. Now that doesn't mean we understand it, but it means that the text that we have is perfect. Our understanding is imperfect. So sometimes we'll read things in the Torah and it will be really confusing. And we might think, maybe God didn't mean that. You know, God meant to write that, but maybe God didn't mean what you think it means. Or maybe God meant it in a different way than you think it means. And that's why, as I said at the very beginning, we study together, we study with commentary, and we keep asking questions and wrestling. We don't just think, my first reading must be fine. Because the Torah is perfect, but we're not. So it's work. Question?
Yes. A commentary. Isn't it knowledge what makes us change our perception of the time? And that's why we need to be exposed to this kind of knowledge?
Exactly. So the idea of growing in our spirit and how we live, we have to be exposed to new ideas from outside of ourselves. Now sometimes we can think and create the ideas on our own. But how do you know that idea is a good idea? Right? If you're reading the Torah and you think, oh, I think this means, how do you know that you're right? Because it feels good? Because there was a rainbow? And then you said, oh, God gave me a rainbow because my idea is right? No. Judaism says nobody gets to decide that they're right on their own. They have to take their idea, take that knowledge, put it on the table. And then you put your idea on the table, you put your idea on the table, and we see what happens. And usually, everybody's idea changes. And everybody's idea gets better. And that's why you may have noticed that Jewish people, we like to argue a lot. We're not arguing because we're unhappy. We're not arguing because we don't like the other ideas. We're arguing because it makes us stronger. You need that resistance, that pushing to get stronger. And you have to have faith that by working together, we each get a little better, a little better. We each add a piece to that puzzle. And hopefully we get a much clearer picture. And it's worked pretty well for 3,000 years. So, keep arguing, keep asking questions, keep pushing. That's what we do. All right, just checking my time. Let's go to number 9. Number 9 is answering a question that often came up that was asked to us by other religions. And they said, okay, maybe there is one God. Maybe there is prophecy. Maybe God cares about the world. And maybe God gave Moses the best prophecy and gave Moses the Torah. But how do you know the Torah you have is the Torah that Moses got? Right? Maybe your Torah is different. Maybe maybe your understanding of the Torah is completely wrong. Number 9 says, no. We have been very, very careful in making sure that we pass on our understanding and the text very carefully. It has been something that we don't just do by, handing the book to the next person. I didn't just give my daughter a copy of the Torah and say, okay, you're a Jew now, go on. We explain it. We study it. And then the student has to show that they understand to the teacher. And then we live together and we work together. And then eventually that person can have their own family, have their own students, and it moves on and on. And we have been very, very careful. And when you look at copies of the Torah that are 1,000 years old, it's the same Torah. When you look at copies of the Torah that are almost 2,000 years old, it's the same Torah. When they have done archaeology in the land of Israel, and they find, for example, techelet, the blue that was for the tzitzit, the fringes, it is the same blue that we believe is the right blue. Right? So when they find tefillin, the boxes that we wear on our head and our arms for the morning prayers, they look like our tefillin, even though they are 500, 1,000, 1,500 years old. The records seem to be indicating that, yeah, we have been very reliable in passing on the understanding and passing on the book. And that has been what has kept us moving in the right direction. Okay, I'm over on this page, number 10. Comes back to the question of what does it matter? We believe that God knows the actions of people and doesn't ignore them. This was a big issue, for example, for the ancient Greek philosophers. They thought that there was a God who made the whole universe and then walked away and didn't care about what the people did, didn't, bother. They thought God was so perfect that God couldn't even touch the world. And Judaism says, no. Yes, God is our king. Right? God is great and amazing, but God is also Avinu. God is also our Father. God cares about us. And like any good parent, God cares about us so much that God watches what we do. And because God watches what we do, number 11, it means that God will reward when we do good, and there will be punishment when we do bad. Now, we're going to go into this in much more detail later. But for tonight, I just want you to know that Jews do believe that there are consequences to our behavior. Now, there's ways to fix when you make mistakes. And that's a very important thing to keep in mind, especially as we get close to Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. But the idea that what we do matters, that there are mistakes, and if you make a mistake, you need to fix it, and that there are good things to do, and you should do the good things, and that there's a reward in this life and the next life, and that there is punishment, is a very important thing to keep in mind. Judaism doesn't believe in people who are being punished and suffering for all of eternity, but we do believe that people who have done something bad and didn't fix it, after they die, there is punishment. It's shorter. It's not really like on a time scale. No one has a watch in the next world, but it's not forever. But it's only as much as you did. If somebody steals $1, the punishment is very small. If someone steals $1 million, the punishment is much bigger. It is what we call proportional. Good for now. We'll go into this in more detail later. Number 12, the Messianic era. So this is us looking this way, right? We've been talking about the past, and then we talked about the present, and now we're talking about the future. And when we talk about the future, we believe that Mashiach, which is what we in English call the Messiah, will eventually come. The Mashiach literally means the anointed one, the one that God has appointed, has given the job of helping to steer the whole world towards God. Because right now we're sort of in 100 different directions. But it's only one God. And if the whole world steers their eyes towards God together, then the world can be made so much better. Right? God wants this world to be a good place without suffering, without war, without people who are dying of hunger, or people who are dying of illnesses that we could easily give them medicine for. God wants the world to be good, but right now we struggle to find the right path. The Mashiach, we believe, will come and will be a teacher that the whole world will recognize and will see this is someone who teaches and can lead us in the right path. And we'll talk in more detail later about how you know who that person is and what the world's going to look like. It's not going to be, rainbows and fairy tales. It'll still be a real world, but it will be a real world done right, rather than our world right now, which has a lot of problems. Not as many as it used to. We are getting better overall, but not enough. Which then brings us to number 13, which is the real future side. Judaism does believe in what we call Nechaye Metim, the resurrection of the dead. That at some point, after the world has been made perfect, there will be a time when everybody who lived will be able to experience the world again in its perfection, the world as it was supposed to be. And that way we can truly appreciate the blessings that God gave us in this life, in this world, with our own physical self. And again, yeah. But it's a good thing. It's a good thing. Right? So Judaism believes this because, well, for one, imagine it as just a matter of fairness. Think of all the people, millions of people who have lived in this world, who were born, lived, and died while there was some terrible king. And they never had a chance to really enjoy life. Their whole life was war and attack and hunger and disease. And they were a good person, right? Or slavery, exactly. But they were a good person, and they tried hard, but their life was just pain, dead. Do you think it's fair that once the Mashiach comes, only the people who are alive when the Mashiach is here get to experience this world the way it's supposed to be? That simply isn't right. So instead, because God knows that this world has blessings that we should be able to experience, that our soul can be enriched by enjoying the good of this world, we all get a second time to be in this world. Now, exactly how that looks, how that works, whether people are standing up from the grave or whether they're being recreated in a bed, that's a whole big argument, and no one has any pictures, so we don't know yet. But the idea that it will happen is a belief in Judaism. And in fact, in our prayer service, there is a prayer that we do in the Amidah. We'll talk about what that means more later, called the Givorot, where we talk about the fact that this is one of the blessings that God has offered, and one of the symbols of God's strength, of God's power, is to make this happen, to be able to give all of us this chance to really be able to experience this world in its fullness, rather than the limited way that most of us have been able to live. And those are the 13 key points that are at the base of our understanding. The rest is detail. Lots and lots of detail, because the idea of Judaism isn't just go and learn it and then sit down and wait. The idea of Judaism is, knowing this, how do we best use our life in order to grow our soul and to make the world as good as it's supposed to be? How do we follow the commandments, which make our own spirit be better and stronger and grow, and make the community around us better and stronger and happier, and make the world around our community better and happier and with less suffering? That is the job that Judaism has given to us. And for those for whom that is, yes, I got it, that's what I want, those are the people who come to Judaism and say, me too. I believe that this path that the Torah has given is a beautiful path that I need to walk, and that I want to share in, and I want to be a part of this journey and this calling. You're welcome. Please. The more people who are trying to follow this path, the more beautiful the world becomes. And I am happy to help any who want to join in that walk. And that's going to do it for tonight. Next week, we are going to talk about how all the different books fit together, so that you know how we know what we know, because during all the other weeks that we meet, I'm going to be talking about the Torah and the Mishnah and the Midrash and the Talmud and the Halacha, and I'm going to use lots of different words and terms, and knowing how they fit together to make this beautiful chain of understanding is really, really important. So it's not just, oh, Rabbi Neely said. It's not Rabbi Neely said, it should be Rabbi Neely explained. Right? Because I want you to understand how it all works. I don't want you to just be able to copy me. I want you to have your own understanding, because it's understanding. It is that knowledge that makes your own spirit stronger, not just imitating what you've heard or seen. So that's what's going to be next week's class.
Good.
Good? Good. 6 o'clock next Thursday.
Thank you.
And don't forget Latino Shabbat on Saturday.
I forgot the other commercial. Yes. But remember, for those of you that are coming for Latino Shabbat especially, you can come any Shabbat or for any other programs and any other activities. It doesn't have to be only Latino Shabbat. Latino Shabbat is special, but not unique. You can come to the other services anytime you want. Good.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Very good, Rab.
Thank you.